I thought catching her in bed with another man was rock bottom. Turns out that was just her opening move. What she did next nearly destroyed everything I'd spent my life building. Hey everyone, my name's Ryan, I'm 35 now, and I've been married to Lindsay, who's 32, for just over 7 years. We met back when I was 25. She had this magnetic presence, smart, stunning, motivated. It felt like she had it all figured out and I was just lucky to be along for the ride. We hit it off almost instantly. Things moved pretty quickly between us and before long we tied the knot. At the time, I genuinely believed life couldn't get any sweeter. We were both doing all right professionally. Lindsay worked in marketing and I ran my own small construction business. We built what felt like a stable life. I trusted her completely. Never once did it cross my mind that anything might be off. But I guess when you're in love, it's easy to miss the small signs. You don't want to believe there could be cracks forming beneath the surface. The first shift was subtle. She started switching up her routine, which caught me off guard. Lindsay had always been someone who thrived on consistency. She used to be home like clockwork around 6 p.m., but then out of nowhere she began having these so-called work dinners and unexpected late-night meetings. I brushed it off at first, telling myself she was just pushing hard at work, maybe chasing a promotion. I wanted to be the supportive husband, cheering her on from the sidelines. But then there was something else. She started putting a lot more effort into her appearance, like more than usual. And not just when she was heading out for those work events. She looked dolled up even on weekends. Initially, I thought maybe she was just feeling good about herself, getting a confidence boost or something. But if I'm being honest, something inside me didn't sit right. It just felt off. Looking back now, that's where it all really started. At the time, I had no idea I was living with someone who had already mastered the art of pretending, of lying right to my face with a straight smile. As those late nights turned into a regular occurrence, the uneasiness began eating at me. It wasn't just suspicion, it was a knot in my gut I couldn't ignore. But I kept quiet. I didn't want to be that jealous guy constantly questioning his wife. I told myself people get busy, priorities shift. But man, if only I had listened to that quiet voice in the back of my mind sooner. There was a change in our mornings too. Lindsay and I used to have this little routine. We'd sit down with our coffee before the day started, talk about nothing and everything. Those peaceful moments meant the world to me. But all of a sudden she started rushing out the door. No more chats, no more slow mornings. Just a quick goodbye and she was gone. It felt like she couldn't wait to get away. Then came the phone thing. She got really private with it. For years her phone would just lie around the house. No passwords, no hiding. We used to swap music, look at funny pictures together. But now it was always glued to her side. I remember once, it buzzed and I reached over to hand it to her. She snatched it so fast it caught me off guard. She laughed it off, saying it was just work, but something about that moment hit me in the gut. Still, I didn't confront her. I wanted to believe everything was okay. Around that same time, she started mentioning this new coffee place she'd found. Said it became her little getaway spot, claimed she went there daily for her iced lattes. I didn't think twice about it. Why would I? But now, with the benefit of hindsight, I can see that was another moment I should have paid attention to. That coffee shop wasn't just her hangout spot, it's where she met him. The barista. But back then I was still clueless. We were still going through the motions of married life. She'd come home smiling, acting like everything was fine. We were even planning a weekend trip, just the two of us. And every time she looked at me and told me she loved me, I believed her. I wanted to believe her. It wasn't until my best friend Adam started picking up on things that the cracks became harder to ignore. One night over a couple of beers he asked if Lindsay was doing okay, said she seemed kind of distant even when we were all together. I brushed it off, said she was probably just stressed from work. But deep down, that was the first moment I admitted to myself that something really might be wrong. And that was just the beginning. As the weeks rolled by, my doubts grew louder. Lindsay would vanish for hours on the weekends, saying she was shopping or meeting up with friends. But she'd return empty-handed, no bags, no signs she'd actually done what she said. When I asked, she always had an excuse. Couldn't find anything she liked, plans changed, met someone for lunch instead. The explanations kept coming, but so did the red flags. Then came the night Adam hit me with something I wasn't ready for. We were out at our usual bar after work, just chatting about random stuff when he paused and said, "Hey, I don't want to stir the pot, but I saw Lindsay downtown last week. She didn't see me, but she wasn't alone. There was a guy with her. And honestly, they looked pretty close." I just stared at him, trying to process what he'd said. My heart was pounding, but I tried to act cool. "Are you sure it was her?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Adam wouldn't lie to me. He nodded. "Yeah man. I wasn't gonna say anything until I was sure. But they were walking real close, looked like more than just friends. It didn't feel right. I laughed it off, told him maybe he was mistaken. I didn't want to believe him. The thought of Lindsay with someone else, it was like my brain couldn't wrap around it. But his words stuck. They echoed in my head for days, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't unsee that image he had painted. That's when I started noticing everything, the little things I'd always brushed off. One evening, Lindsay was getting dressed up again, saying she had some late client dinner. I played it cool and casually asked, "Where's the meeting? Maybe I'll swing by and give you a ride home." She froze for just a second, barely noticeable but enough to make my heart skip. Then she named this upscale restaurant I didn't even know she knew existed. That split-second hesitation? It felt like a gut punch. I knew something was off. I didn't confront her, not right away. Instead, I waited. Once she left, I did something I never imagined I'd be the type of man to do. I followed her. Sounds crazy, I know. But I was drowning in doubt and needed to know if my instincts were right. So I grabbed my keys, hopped in my truck, and trailed her car from a distance. And sure enough, she wasn't going where she said she was. Instead, she pulled into a tucked-away parking lot, behind that coffee shop she'd been raving about for weeks. The one that had somehow become her second home. And then I saw him. The barista. He got out of his car, and they walked toward each other like they were in their own little world. I watched as she wrapped her arms around him, and kissed him. Just like that. My wife. Kissing another man like I was invisible. I didn't get out. I didn't say a word. I just sat there numb, watching my world collapse in real time. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight I thought I'd break it. I couldn't cry, I couldn't scream, I just froze. My heart shattered in silence. When she came home later that night, everything was back to normal. She gave me a quick kiss on the cheek, said she was exhausted from her meeting, and headed to bed. That was the moment it really hit me. Lindsay had become a master at deception. She looked me in the eye, told me she loved me, and then fell asleep right next to me like she hadn't just erased everything we built. And what I didn't know then, that guy wasn't the only one. I laid there all night, staring up at the ceiling, while she slept peacefully beside me. My mind kept looping back to what I saw, the parking lot, the way she smiled at him, the kiss. I felt sick. Like I didn't even recognize the person lying next to me anymore. I wasn't just heartbroken, I felt completely lost. The next morning I acted like nothing was wrong. But inside I was spiraling. I didn't know what my next move should be. Do I confront her? Wait, get more proof? It felt like I was stuck in a nightmare, and part of me wasn't ready to wake up until I had all the answers. So I started observing, really observing. Every word she said, every expression on her face. She started texting more often, always making sure her phone was screened down when it was nearby. I'd catch her smirking at messages and then sneaking quick glances at me, like she was making sure I hadn't noticed. But I did. I noticed everything now. One night stands out clear as day. We were sitting on the couch watching a show when her phone buzzed. She snatched it off the table like it was on fire. I asked real calm, "Who's that?" She gave me this light laugh like I was just being playful. "Oh, just Lauren from the office," she said. "We're organizing some team thing next week." I nodded, pretending to buy it. But in my gut, I knew that wasn't true. There was no team event. Lauren was just the name she used to cover her tracks. And I didn't push her on it, not yet. I needed more. Days passed and Lindsay kept the act going, smiles, kisses, morning coffee like we were still us. But I knew she wasn't spending all that time at work like she claimed. We'd always shared our locations, just a safety thing, but I started checking more often. And there it was. Time and again she was at the coffee shop when she said she was in meetings. No calls. No spreadsheets. Just him. That's when I started digging deeper. I pulled up our bank statements, combed through every charge. And sure enough, there were all these small payments to cafes, restaurants, and hotels. At first, I told myself maybe they were client expenses. Maybe I was reading too much into it. But the timestamps didn't lie. They didn't match up with her work schedule. Not even close. Then came the final straw. One afternoon I made a choice. I picked up the phone and called her office thinking I'd surprise her, take her to lunch, maybe break the routine. Her assistant answered, and when I asked if Lindsay was available, I got silence. She's not in today," the woman said, sounding confused. She actually took the day off. My whole body went cold. Lindsay had told me she was at the office. She even mentioned a big meeting that morning. I managed to say thanks, hung up, and just sat there, staring at nothing. It was the confirmation I'd been avoiding. She was lying. To my face. Every day. When she walked through the door that night, all smiles and sweet as ever, it took everything in me not to fall apart right then and there. I couldn't even look at her the same way. I knew I had to confront her. But I also knew she'd talk circles around the truth unless I had her backed into a corner. If I wanted answers, real answers, I had to be smart. I had to be ready. That was the moment I knew I had to catch her in the act. No more guessing, no more second-guessing myself. I needed the truth laid out bare. So I set a trap. By the time I got to that point, I was already drained, mentally, emotionally, just tired. Living with that kind of constant doubt wears you down. I was sharing a home with someone I barely recognized anymore, and I needed answers. I needed something solid, something that would finally strip away all the lies she'd been feeding me. So, the next day, I told Lindsay I had a major project that would keep me out on a job site all day. She didn't even flinch, didn't question a thing. I guess when you've been trustworthy for over 7 years, your word just gets taken at face value. But truth was, I wasn't going to work that day. Not even close. She left the house that morning like everything was perfectly normal. Gave me a quick kiss, grabbed her bag and walked out the door. I waited about 15 minutes before I followed her. My heart was racing, my hands shaking on the wheel. I didn't recognize myself, this quiet, suspicious man trailing his wife through traffic. But I had to see for myself. I couldn't keep living in limbo. Sure enough, she ended up right where I figured she'd be, her beloved coffee shop. It had become her little sanctuary, but I knew better now. I parked a few blocks away and waited, keeping low in my seat, watching from a distance. Half an hour later, she walked out, with him. The barista. The same guy she swore was just friendly. They were laughing, totally wrapped up in each other. You'd think they didn't have a care in the world. I felt like I was watching someone else's life unfold in front of me. Like I wasn't part of this story anymore, just a spectator to my own heartbreak. But then they did something I didn't expect. Instead of going to his place or a hotel, they drove to my house. The one I'd worked long days and late nights to afford. The place Lindsay and I had turned into a home. That's where she brought him. I kept my distance, parking a few houses down. I could barely breathe. They pulled into the driveway laughing like they hadn't just wrecked a marriage. And I sat there, fists clenched, jaw tight, staring at the front door as it closed behind them. I waited. 10 minutes, maybe more. Long enough to let the silence settle like a storm about to break. Then I got out of the truck, walked up to the door and stepped inside as quietly as I could. Every step felt heavier than the last. And then I heard them. Upstairs. It hit me all at once. The betrayal. The absurdity of it. That familiar voice I used to fall asleep to, now speaking in tones meant for someone else. I gripped the doorknob to the bedroom, my knuckles white, my chest ready to cave in. Then I kicked it open. And there they were. Lindsay and the barista. In our bed. For a moment, no one moved. Lindsay's eyes went wide and she grabbed the blanket to cover herself. The guy looked stunned, like a kid caught sneaking out past curfew. And me? I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just stood there, completely numb. Get out, I said, my voice low and shaking with barely contained fury. Both of you. He didn't say a word. Just grabbed his clothes and scrambled out like a ghost. I barely noticed him. My focus was on Lindsay, the woman I'd promised forever to. She was crying now, trying to speak, trying to explain. But I wasn't interested in stories. Not anymore. You don't have to say anything, I told her. I've seen all I need to. Then I walked out of the room, out of the house, past everything that used to make sense. I got in my truck and started driving with no destination. My thoughts were a blur. I kept replaying the scene in my head, the way they looked at each other, how at home she seemed with him, how wrong it all felt. Every mile I drove felt like I was trying to outrun something I'd never be able to unsee. Eventually, I pulled into an empty parking lot and just sat there. Hands on the wheel, engine off, silence pressing in around me. And that's when it hit me, this wasn't just about him. The barista wasn't the start of this. He was just the one who got caught. Lindsay had been doing this longer than I wanted to admit. I thought back to every suspicious work event, every excuse that didn't quite add up. The client dinners, the surprise days off, the mysterious charges on our credit card for restaurants and hotels I'd never set foot in. It all started making sense. My stomach churned as the realization sank in deeper. This wasn't just one mistake. This was a pattern. And I had no idea how long it had been going on, or how many others there had been. I couldn't let it rest. I had to know the full extent of what Lindsay had done. I needed every ugly truth laid bare. If she'd been with more than just the barista, I had to uncover it. I wasn't going to sit back and let her twist the story or crawl her way out of it with more lies. When I got home that evening, she was sitting on the couch, looking completely broken. Her eyes were swollen, red from crying, her makeup smeared. As soon as I stepped through the door, she opened her mouth like she was ready to unload an apology, but I lifted my hand. "Not now," I said, voice flat and cold. "We'll talk later. I'm not ready to hear whatever it is you're about to spin." She nodded quietly for once. I went straight upstairs, not to cool down, not to calm my nerves, but to dig. I needed space to think, yeah, but more than that, I needed to uncover the rest of what she was hiding. I noticed her phone sitting on the nightstand. Normally, she guarded that thing like a hawk, but tonight she must have been too rattled to remember. I picked it up, hands trembling slightly, and opened it. She hadn't changed her passcode. The text messages? Gone. Everything wiped clean. Not a single conversation in sight. I wasn't surprised. Lindsay had always been sharp, knew how to cover her trail. But she wasn't perfect. Next, I opened her email. I combed through her inbox, then the archived folders until I found a thread between her and someone named Mark. My stomach sank as I read the emails. They weren't recent. They dated back to a business trip she took last year. A trip she'd said was all work, super boring. Turned out, Mark wasn't just a client. Their messages weren't about contracts or campaigns. They were flirty, intimate. They talked about late-night meetups and finally having time alone. My hands clenched the phone so tight I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. That's when it all started to come together. The barista wasn't a one-off. He wasn't even the beginning. There'd been someone before him. And probably someone before that. The emotional weight of it hit me all over again. Lindsay hadn't just made a mistake, she had made a lifestyle out of betrayal. That night I couldn't hold back. I walked downstairs, tossed the phone onto the coffee table, and looked her straight in the eye. "How long?" I asked, barely able to keep my voice from cracking. "How long has this been going on?" She broke again. Started sobbing. She admitted it wasn't just the guy from the coffee shop. Mark was real. And there were others, flings, moments, people she barely remembers, but still shared herself with. She kept saying none of it meant anything. That she still loved me. That she was lost and made mistakes. But the words felt hollow. I'd heard too many excuses already. I couldn't take one more lie disguised as a reason. That was the final straw. I told her to pack her things and get out. I couldn't even look at her. As she scrambled to gather her stuff, she kept pleading, crying, asking for another chance, saying we could fix it. But I was done. She'd burned every bridge between us. There was nothing left to repair. And still, that wasn't the end. Not even close. A week later, I was cleaning up around the house, just trying to breathe again, trying to reclaim the space that had turned into a prison. I was going through drawers in the bedroom, clearing out old receipts and forgotten clutter. That's when I found it. An envelope. Tucked deep in the back of her nightstand drawer, under random papers. No name, no return address, just our house listed as the destination. Inside was a printed letter. It was from the barista. Signed with his name. And it wasn't some sappy love note. It was a detailed confession. He laid it all out, how long their affair had been going on, how many times they'd met while I was at work, right there in my home. He mentioned exact times, days she texted him to say I'd left. He wrote it like he was getting something off his chest. Like he wanted to apologize, not just to me but maybe to himself too. But the part that gutted me the most? Lindsay had been lying not only to me but to them too. She told him we weren't really married anymore. That we were just roommates sharing a house because we couldn't afford to move out. She told him I was cold, emotionally unavailable. That I didn't care. That she was lonely and hurting. She spun a sob story, played the victim. And apparently she did the same with every other man she'd been with. The barista even mentioned a plan Lindsay had, how she told him she was waiting for the right time to end things with me. That she just wanted to take one last vacation, squeeze out one final getaway before starting fresh. So that weekend trip we were planning? It wasn't for us. It was for her. A final act before the curtain fell. Everything I thought we were rebuilding was a lie. Every kiss, every I love you, every plan, it had all been part of her exit strategy. I couldn't breathe. I felt like the air had been ripped from my lungs. Everything I believed in, everything I thought I knew about Lindsay, was a lie. I had trusted her with my heart, my loyalty, my future. And she'd shattered all of it piece by piece. And for what? Some cheap thrill? A chance to rewrite herself as the victim in some fantasy she made up to justify her actions? I sat there with the barista's letter in my lap, staring at it like it might disappear if I blinked hard enough. But the words didn't change. The truth stared back at me in black and white. This wasn't just infidelity. This was a calculated campaign of deceit, of manipulation and betrayal on a level I hadn't even thought possible. The woman I married was gone. In her place stood someone I didn't recognize. That night I made a choice. A final one. The next morning I called my attorney. I handed over everything, the screenshots, the emails, and that confession letter from the barista. I told him I wanted her out of my house, out of my life, and out of my story. No more discussions. No more apologies. No more, maybe there's still something to save. There was nothing left. But Lindsay? She didn't take it lying down. She started popping up again, at the house, outside my work, sending long messages late at night. At first, she was in tears, swearing the letter was fake, that the barista had written it out of bitterness because she ended things. She said he was trying to ruin her. She said she only wanted to talk to set the record straight. I didn't believe a word. I told her to leave, made it crystal clear she wasn't welcome. But she wouldn't go quietly. About a week later, she showed up again. This time there were no tears. She stood in the doorway, calm and almost too composed, like she'd rehearsed this. "Ryan," she said, her voice strangely level. "We need to talk." I leaned against the kitchen counter, arms folded, not moving an inch. "No, we don't. It's over. You ended it." She didn't budge. "You're only seeing one side. You don't know everything." I cut her off. "No, Lindsay. I know enough. I know about Mark. I know about the barista. And I know there were others. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending you're the one who's been wronged." She stepped inside anyway, ignoring my silence. There was something different in her eyes now, something colder, more calculating. "You're making a mistake," she said, her tone flat. "You're throwing away years over some misunderstandings." I let out a bitter laugh. "Misunderstandings? You were cheating on me in our bed, Lindsay. With multiple men. This wasn't one bad night, this was your pattern." That's when her mask slipped. Her voice dropped, her expression hardened. "You really think you're going to come out of this clean? Like you're the noble one?" She stepped closer, her tone sharp. "If you try to take everything from me, I'll make sure you regret it." My chest tightened. "What's that supposed to mean?" She leaned in, eyes narrowed. "I know things, Ryan. Things that could ruin your reputation. Don't test me. If you drag me down, I'll take you with me." There it was. The real Lindsay. No more pretense. No more soft voice or guilty tears, just venom. I stood my ground. "You don't scare me anymore. Whatever threats you've got, throw them. I'm not backing down. You've already taken enough." She stared at me for a long moment, like she was weighing her options. Then, without another word, she turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. My hands were shaking, not from fear but from adrenaline. I'd seen a side of her that confirmed every dark suspicion I'd carried in my chest. But the worst wasn't over yet. Days later I got the call. My lawyer said Lindsay had filed her response. She was contesting the divorce. Not just contesting it, she was going for blood. She claimed I had been emotionally abusive, that she'd felt neglected and unloved. She painted herself as the woman pushed too far, abandoned by the man who was supposed to protect her. It was a complete rewrite of history. She wasn't just going after the house or the money, she was trying to destroy my name, my dignity. It was about control now. About making sure I couldn't move on cleanly, without her shadow hovering over my shoulder. She wanted to win. No matter what it cost. But I wasn't going to let her. I knew Lindsay was manipulative, but I still wasn't ready for just how far she'd go once the divorce became real. When she decided to contest it and flip the story on me, I was blindsided. After everything she'd done, every lie, every betrayal, I was the one painted as the bad guy? She moved quickly, crafting a whole new narrative. It didn't take long before I started hearing from people we both knew, mutual friends who had no clue what really happened. Lindsay was out there spinning her version, telling anyone who'd listened that I'd been emotionally unavailable, that I'd driven her into someone else's arms. She said I was obsessed with my work and barely noticed her anymore. That she had slipped up, because she felt neglected and unloved. I couldn't wrap my head around it. The woman who cheated on me with multiple men, in my house, was now playing the victim. And somehow, some people were buying it. I got messages from friends saying they were sorry to hear what happened, and that maybe I should sit down with her and talk things through. As if this was some misunderstanding. As if her betrayal was a reaction to me. I wasn't going to let that stand. I called my lawyer and laid it all out, the threats, the deception, the smear campaign she was waging behind my back. He reassured me. We had the receipts, emails, messages, the barista's confession. But he also warned me, These kinds of divorces, when contested, can get downright ugly. And he was right. It started almost immediately. Lindsay's lawyer filed to freeze our joint accounts, claiming she needed financial support during this stressful time. Never mind that she'd already spent thousands from our savings, on God knows what, while I was out working late trying to keep everything afloat. Every day it felt like something new, another letter from her legal team, more claims, more lies. She wasn't just trying to protect herself, she was trying to bleed me dry. She demanded spousal support, claimed emotional trauma, even tried to go after my business. After everything she'd done, she had the nerve to ask for a monthly check. We were building our case, gathering everything. But the weight of it all was crushing. It wasn't just the legal battle, it was the emotional toll of still having her in my life, still pulling strings, still trying to keep control. I couldn't breathe without feeling like she was just around the corner with another attack. Then came the call from Adam, my best friend. He was furious. "Man, you're not gonna believe this," he said. "She reached out to me. Tried to tell me you neglected her. That she was hurting. She actually wanted me to testify for her." My stomach dropped. "What did you say?" Adam didn't even hesitate. "I told her to go to hell. She's gone too far. You've got to shut this down before she poisons everything." And he was right. I had spent too much time on the defensive, trying to survive her chaos. It was time to stop reacting and start fighting back. I told my lawyer to move forward, full offense. We presented the full scope. The romantic emails with Mark, the explicit chats with the barista, the bank records that clearly showed where the money was going. We laid it out piece by piece. When we finally got to court, Lindsay walked in like she owned the room. Calm, polished, like none of it touched her. But as the evidence came forward, one detail after another, I watched the cracks form. Her lawyer tried to redirect, framing it all as mistakes made in an unhappy marriage, but the judge wasn't buying it. By the end, her carefully built image was gone. The court saw it clearly. This wasn't about a neglected wife or a failing marriage. This was about years of deceit, manipulation, and betrayal. The real victim wasn't Lindsay, it was me. But even after all of that, she wasn't done. I figured that courtroom was the final blow, that she'd finally accept defeat. The facts were all on the table. There was nothing left to spin. I was starting to feel like I could finally move forward. Then a few days later, I came home to find an envelope taped to my front door. My gut told me to ignore it, to just rip it in half and toss it in the trash. But something stopped me. I peeled it off the door and opened it, bracing myself for another threat or some new legal demand. But it was worse than I imagined. So much worse. Inside the envelope was a letter, scrawled in handwriting I knew all too well. But this wasn't an apology. It wasn't a plea for forgiveness or another twisted attempt to justify what she'd done. This letter was a warning. No, a threat. The kind that sent a chill straight through my spine. "If you think this is over," it began, "then you really never knew me at all. You might have won in court, Ryan, but I'm not fading into the background. You can strip me of money and reputation, but if you try to take everything, there will be consequences. I know things about you. Things that could ruin you." I just sat there on the porch, letter trembling in my hands. My mind was racing. What was she talking about? What things did she think she had on me? I wasn't the one who'd spent years cheating. I wasn't the one spinning lies. I had nothing to hide. But Lindsay had always been skilled at twisting perception, and I knew better than to underestimate how far she'd go when cornered. The rest of the letter made her intentions crystal clear. She threatened to go after my business. Said she could reveal things to clients and suppliers that would make me look like the villain. She even hinted at fabricating stories, accusations of emotional abuse, of mistreatment, claims that, while completely false, could still destroy everything I'd built. My blood went cold. She wasn't playing within the rules anymore. The court didn't give her what she wanted, so she was planning to set fire to everything on the way out. She didn't care about the truth, only about control. That letter was her declaration: if I can't win, no one does. I felt a heat rise in my chest, not just anger but pure disbelief. After all the trust, after everything I'd given her, years of loyalty, commitment, trying to build a life, this was her way of ending it? By threatening the last thing I had left? My career? But as I read it over again, a different feeling crept in. Clarity. This wasn't strength, it was desperation. Lindsay had lost the fight. The mask was gone. This was a flailing attempt to scare me into making a deal, to backpedal, to offer her something, anything, just to avoid more pain. I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. The next morning, I walked into my lawyer's office and dropped the letter on his desk. He read it silently, then looked up and shook his head. She's grasping, he said. This is classic emotional extortion. She's trying to shake you, make you second-guess yourself. But you have the evidence. The court believed you. I nodded, but the worry hadn't left. But what if she actually starts reaching out to clients? If she starts spreading lies, it could ruin my business. He leaned forward. Then we file a cease and desist immediately. We document everything. And if she crosses that line, we hit back with a defamation lawsuit. You've got nothing to hide, Ryan, and we can prove it. That gave me a bit of peace, but I knew Lindsay too well to relax completely. She was volatile. Dangerous in a way that didn't involve fists, but stories, half-truths and carefully crafted versions of events meant to twist people's perception. If she decided to act on this threat, I'd have a storm on my hands. For a while nothing happened. Days passed, then weeks. I stayed alert, waiting for the other shoe to drop. But it didn't. No rumors. No calls. No angry emails from clients. It was quiet. Too quiet. And just when I thought she might have finally let go, that maybe she'd accepted defeat, I got a message. It came from an unknown number. No words. Just a photo. Lindsay. With another man. Not holding hands, not just out somewhere public, but inside my house. Our house. The one I'd bled for. Worked nights and weekends to build and keep. The same home where she had once promised me forever. And now there she was. Arms around him, grinning like she'd already replaced me. The message wasn't about love or even lust. It was about power. It was her way of saying, I'm still here. I still own space in your life. You haven't won. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. It wasn't about the guy, he was just another pawn. It was Lindsay. Still pulling strings. Still trying to rattle me. Still reminding me she wasn't finished. Not yet.